That night I heard my son whisper the PIN code to his wife. "Take it all out," he hissed. "There is over $100,000 on that card." I just lay there in the dark and smiled. 40 minutes later, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a panicked message from his wife screaming, "Babe, your mom knew everything. She knew." Now I am, well, let's just say she was not celebrating. If you think you know your family, wait until there is an inheritance involved. Before I tell you how I set the trap that destroyed my own son's greed, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach an ungrateful relative a lesson they would never forget. My name is Desmond Cole. I am 72 years old, and for 40 years I worked as a forensic accountant in Chicago. My job was simple. I followed the money. I found the lies hidden in spreadsheets, and I sent wealthy men to prison because they thought they were smarter than the numbers. I spent a lifetime catching strangers who stole. I never imagined that the most dangerous thieves I would ever encounter would be the ones sleeping down the hall in the guest bedroom of my own house. It started at exactly 2 in the morning. Old age comes with a curse called insomnia. My joints ache when the temperature drops, and tonight my lower back was throbbing like a toothache. I was wide awake staring at the darkness of my eyelids, but my breathing was heavy and rhythmic. I have perfected the art of feigning sleep. It is a survival mechanism when you live in a house where you are considered a burden. Then I heard it. The sound was faint, but to my ears it sounded like a gunshot. The brass handle of my bedroom turned slowly. Check that. It did not just turn. It hesitated. Someone was testing the weight of the door, trying to silence the hinges. I knew instantly that this was not a checkup to see if I needed water. People who care about you knock. People who rob you creep. I kept my rhythm steady. In, out. A slight snore on the exhale. The door pushed open, and the air in my room changed. The sterile smell of my old age was instantly invaded by 2 distinct scents. First came the sharp, stinging odor of cheap tequila. That was my son, Brandon. He had been drinking since noon, trying to drown the reality of his failed crypto investments. Following him was a cloud of floral sweetness. Chanel No. 5. Too much of it. That was Tiffany, my daughter-in-law. She wore expensive perfume to mask the scent of her own desperation. They moved toward the bed. I could feel the heat of their bodies standing over me. "Do it quickly," Tiffany whispered. Her voice was tight, like a violin string about to snap. "He is asleep." I wanted to open my eyes. I wanted to sit up and ask them what they were doing in my room in the middle of the night. I wanted to be the father who protects his house. But the forensic accountant in me took over. You do not interrupt a crime in progress until you have all the evidence. You let the criminal dig their own grave. So I lay there. I let my jaw go slack. I let a little bit of drool escape the corner of my mouth. To them, I was just a senile old man, a carcass that had not finished dying yet. "He is definitely out," Brandon whispered back. His words were slurred. "Look at him. He is practically in a coma." I felt a shadow pass over my face. Then I felt the vibration on the floorboards as they moved to the oak nightstand beside my head. That nightstand was a gift from my late wife, Patricia. On it sat a glass of water, my reading glasses, and my leather wallet. The friction of leather against wood is a sound I will never forget. It was a soft, sliding noise. Brandon was taking my wallet. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was terrified they would hear it. This was the wallet where I kept the picture of Patricia. This was the wallet that held the credit card they had been eyeing for months. The Platinum Reserve card. Patricia and I had set up that account 3 years ago when she first got sick. It was supposed to be for emergencies, for medical bills, for the end-of-life care. But Patricia was smarter than me. She always was. 2 weeks before she died, she made me promise something. She held my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. For a woman who weighed less than 90 pounds, and said, "Desmond, if the kids ever try to use this card without asking, do not stop them. Let them enter the PIN. Promise me." I promised her. And now in the dark, I understood why. "Got it," Brandon hissed. "Okay, open it," Tiffany commanded. "Which one is it?" "The black one. The one with the silver chip." I heard the plastic snap as they pulled the card from its slot. "What is the PIN code?" Tiffany asked. Her voice was greedy, impatient. "I do not know," Brandon stammered. "Try his birthday. 081952. There was a silence. I could picture them punching the numbers into a banking app or maybe just writing it down to use at the ATM later. "No," Tiffany spat. "That is not it. Think, Brandon. You lived with them for 30 years. What number would he use?" I forced myself to let out a long, rattling snore. I shifted my legs slightly, just enough to make them freeze. I could feel their fear. It was electric. They were not scared of hurting me. They were scared of getting caught before they got the money. "Wait," Brandon said. His voice dropped to a barely audible murmur. "Mom. It has to be Mom." "What about her?" Tiffany asked. "The day she died. He was obsessed with that date. He has not changed the calendar in the kitchen since she passed." "Try it." April 12th, 2022. 041222. My breath hitched in my throat. I could not help it. Hearing that date from his mouth felt like a physical blow. April 12th was the day my world ended. It was the day I sat by a hospital bed and watched the light fade from the eyes of the only woman who ever truly loved me. It was a sacred date, a date of mourning. And my son was using it as a skeleton key to rob me. 041222, Tiffany repeated slowly. I waited. The silence in the room stretched for 10 seconds. 10 seconds that felt like 10 years. I visualized the card. I visualized the trap Patricia had helped me engineer. Then Tiffany gasped. "Oh my God, Brandon. It worked. Look at the balance." "How much?" Brandon asked, his voice trembling. $158,000. Tiffany sounded like she was having a religious experience. "Babe, we are rich. We can pay off the loan sharks. We can book the Maldives. We can finally get out of this dump." "Take it," Brandon said. "Take it all." "Not yet," Tiffany whispered. "We need to go to the ATM. The daily limit for transfer is too low. We have to withdraw cash and then do the transfer. Get the keys." They moved away from the bed. I felt the wallet being placed back on the nightstand. But it was lighter now. The card was gone. "Let's go," Brandon said. "He won't wake up until noon. He is useless." The door clicked shut. The room returned to silence. The smell of cheap tequila and expensive perfume lingered in the air, polluting the sanctuary where my wife used to sleep. I lay there for another full minute just to be sure. Then I slowly opened my eyes. The darkness was no longer frightening. It was comforting. It was my ally. I reached over to the nightstand and turned on the small lamp. The light was sudden and sharp. I picked up my wallet. They had been sloppy. The wallet was placed at a slight angle, not parallel to the edge of the table as I always kept it. I opened it. The slot where the platinum card used to reside was empty. It looked like a missing tooth. A wave of sadness washed over me. Not for the money. I did not care about the money. I was sad because until this very moment, a small, foolish part of me still hoped I was wrong. I hoped my son was just lost, not corrupt. I hoped his wife was just ambitious, not predatory. But the empty slot in the wallet was the truth staring me in the face. Facts do not care about your feelings. That is what I used to tell the juries. I sat up and swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My knees cracked, but the pain felt distant now. I had work to do. I looked at the digital clock. 2:12 in the morning. They were probably running to the car right now. Tiffany would be driving because Brandon was too drunk. They would be heading to the 24-hour ATM at the drive-thru on 4th Street. It was the furthest one from the house, thinking that distance would provide safety. I reached for my phone. I did not call the police. Not yet. Instead, I opened an app that my lawyer Leonard and I had installed 6 months ago. It was a mirror app linked to the trust fund that the credit card was attached to. I saw the notification. Unusual activity detected. PIN entry successful. Location mobile device. I sat there in the pale yellow light of the lamp, and for the first time in 2 years, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who just heard the trap snap shut. "Go ahead, Brandon," I whispered to the empty room. "Enter the date your mother died. Enter the date you forgot to mourn because you were too busy asking about the will. Go ahead." Patricia was right. She always said that greed makes people blind. They saw $150,000. They did not see the digital tripwire that was wrapped around every single cent. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the headlights of Brandon's car peel out of the driveway. They were speeding. They were in a rush to ruin their lives. I went to my desk and opened my laptop. It was time to initiate the sunflower protocol. That was the code name Patricia chose. She loved sunflowers. She said they always turned toward the light. But tonight, my son and his wife had chosen the darkness. And in the darkness, I was the king. The smell of bacon grease is usually a scent that triggers comfort, but this morning it triggered my gag reflex. I lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to the clatter of pans downstairs. It was a performance. For the last 3 years, the only thing Tiffany had ever made in that kitchen was reservations at overpriced sushi restaurants and stiff cocktails for her friends. But today, the house smelled like a quintessential American commercial for a happy family. It was nauseating because I knew exactly what lay beneath that crispy veneer of cured pork. I swung my legs out of bed and planted my feet on the cold hardwood. My back gave a familiar twinge of pain, but I welcomed it. Pain keeps you sharp. Pain reminds you that you are still alive in a world that wants to bury you. I shuffled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at the man in the mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, but the steel-gray irises were clear. I practiced my expression. I let my jaw go slack. I widened my eyes slightly to give them a vacant, watery look. If they wanted a senile old fool, that I would give them an Academy Award-winning performance. I walked down the stairs, gripping the banister tighter than necessary. As I entered the kitchen, the scene was almost blindingly domestic. Sunlight streamed through the bay windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The table was set with the good china the plates Patricia used to save for Thanksgiving. Brandon was sitting at the head of the table nursing a mug of black coffee, while Tiffany stood by the stove flipping pancakes with a manic sort of energy. She was wearing an apron. I had never seen that piece of fabric in my life. It looked like a costume prop. "Good morning, Dad," Tiffany chirped, spinning around with a spatula in hand. Her smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were calculating, scanning my face for any sign that I knew about the midnight robbery. "You are up early? I made your favorite. Blueberry pancakes and crispy bacon. Sit down. I will pour you some orange juice." I moved slowly, dragging my feet against the tile. I mumbled a thank you that sounded more like a grunt and lowered myself into my chair. Brandon looked up from his phone. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of coffee could fix. The guilt was eating him from the inside out. Or maybe it was just the hangover from the tequila. "Morning, Pop," he said. His voice cracked. "How did you sleep?" I picked up my napkin and unfolded it with trembling hands. Like a log, I lied. I did not hear a thing. Must be these old ears. They are not what they used to be. I saw the tension leave Brandon's shoulders. He exhaled a long breath and took a sip of his coffee. Tiffany placed a stack of pancakes in front of me, drowning in syrup. "Eat up," she said. "You need your strength." I cut into the pancakes. They were rubbery, but I chewed them slowly, making a show of enjoying every bite. I needed to lower their guard. I needed them to think I was completely oblivious so that when I snapped the trap, they would not see it coming. So Brandon said, clearing his throat, "Tiffany and I were talking last night. About the house." I stopped chewing. Here it comes, I thought. The setup. "Oh," I asked. "What about the house?" "Well, the roof," Brandon said. He avoided my eyes, staring intently at a knot in the wooden table. "I went up there yesterday to check the gutters, and I saw some serious water damage. If we do not fix it before the rainy season starts next month, we could be looking at mold. Structural rot. It is dangerous. Pop, especially for someone with your respiratory issues." I took a sip of juice to hide the smirk that threatened to form on my lips. My respiratory issues were non-existent. I ran 3 miles a day until I was 65, but I nodded along. "Oh dear," I said. "That sounds expensive." "It is," Brandon said quickly. "I got a quote this morning. It is going to be about $5,000 for the materials and labor." $5,000. It was a pitiful amount compared to the $150,000 they had access to via the card they stole last night. But criminals are greedy and stupid. They wanted to milk the cow from both ends. They wanted the stolen money for their luxuries and my legitimate money for their cover stories. Or maybe they just needed cash immediately to pay off the vigorish on the loan shark debt before they could figure out how to liquidate the trust fund. "And that is not all," Tiffany chimed in. She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. Her voice took on that sugary, persuasive tone she used when she wanted to manipulate someone. "I have been thinking, Dad. Since I am home all day taking care of things, I should really contribute more. I have this amazing opportunity to buy into a franchise, a boutique spa just downtown. The initial investment is low, but the returns are huge. It would secure our future." I looked from one to the other. The liar and the thief. My legacy. I let my fork slip from my fingers. It hit the porcelain plate with a loud clatter and bounced onto the floor. "Oops," I muttered, staring at my shaking hand. Clumsy. I am so clumsy lately. For a split second, the mask slipped. Tiffany rolled her eyes. It was a quick, involuntary spasm of annoyance before she plastered the smile back on. "Oh, do not worry, Dad," she said, her voice tight. "I will get it." She bent down to retrieve the fork. While she was out of sight, I looked straight at Brandon. He flinched. $5,000 for the roof," I said, my voice quavering. "And how much for the spa, Tiffany?" $10,000, she said, popping back up. "Just 10. $15,000. They were asking me to sign a check for $15,000 while they had my credit card in their pocket. It was almost impressive how shameless they were. I sighed, a long, rattling sound that seemed to come from the depths of my lungs. "You know, kids," I said, staring into my orange juice. "I have been feeling so tired lately, keeping track of bills, calling the contractors, managing the accounts. It is all becoming too much for me. My memory is going. I forget where I put things." I paused. The room went silent. The only sound was the humming of the refrigerator. Maybe I continued looking up at them with wide, innocent eyes. "Maybe it is time I let you two handle the finances. You are young. You are smart. You know what is best." Brandon choked on his coffee. He coughed violently, pounding his chest. Tiffany's eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked like she had won the lottery. "You mean it?" she asked, breathless. "You want us to take over the accounts?" "Yes," I said. "Why not? Why should I worry about money at my age?" I should just enjoy my pancakes. I patted the breast pocket of my cardigan. Then I patted my pants pocket. I frowned, my brow furrowed in confusion. Wait, I said. Speaking of money. Where is my wallet? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Brandon stopped coughing. He froze. Tiffany went perfectly still, the spatula dripping syrup onto the counter. I had it last night, I said, my voice rising in panic. I put it on the nightstand. I remember putting it right there next to your mother's picture. Where is it? Did I lose it? Oh God, I am losing my mind. I stood up, knocking my chair back. I began to pat my pockets frantically, turning in a circle. I need to find it. My cards are in there. My ID. I have to call the bank. I have to cancel everything right now. No, Brandon shouted. He jumped up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. No, Pop, do not call the bank. I stopped and looked at him. Why not, son? If it is stolen, we have to stop the thief. It is not stolen, he stammered. His face was pale and a bead of sweat rolled down his temple. I saw it. You saw it? I asked. Yes. This morning, when I came in to check on you. It had fallen on the floor, under the bed. I put it in the drawer so you would not step on it. I stared at him. The lie was clumsy, improvised, and pathetic, but it was exactly what I wanted to hear. He had just admitted to being in my room. He had admitted to handling my property. Oh, thank heavens, I said, sinking back into my chair and clutching my chest. I thought I had been robbed. You are a good boy, Brandon. Always looking out for your old dad. Tiffany let out a breath that sounded like a deflating tire. She walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. Her fingers felt like claws. See, Dad, she said, you really are getting forgetful. That is why you should let us handle the money. We will keep it safe. We will make sure everything is taken care of. I looked at her hand on my shoulder, then up into her predatory eyes. I reached up and patted her hand. You are right, Tiffany, I said. You are absolutely right. Go ahead. Take the money for the roof. Take the money for the spa. In fact, take the cards. Manage it all. I trust you. Her smile was genuine now. It was the smile of a wolf that had just been invited into the sheep pen. Thank you, Dad, she whispered. You won't regret this. I smiled back, a genuine smile, because I knew something she didn't. I knew that by taking control, they were not gaining freedom. They were signing a confession. I will just finish my breakfast, I said, picking up my fork. You two have a busy day ahead of you. As they walked out of the kitchen, whispering excitedly to each other, I cut another piece of pancake. It still tasted like rubber. But as I chewed, I savored the sweetness, not of the syrup, but of the justice that was coming. They thought they had just been handed the keys to the kingdom. They had no idea they had just locked themselves in the dungeon. And I held the only key. I walked up the stairs slowly. Every step was a heavy thud against the wood, echoing the heaviness in my chest. I made sure to hold on to the railing and pause halfway up, just in case they were watching from the hallway below. I had to maintain the illusion of frailty for just a little longer. But the moment I closed my bedroom door and turned the lock, the old man vanished. My posture straightened. My breathing shifted from the shallow gasps of a retiree to the steady, measured rhythm of an investigator entering a crime scene. I did not go to the window to look at the view. I went straight to the nightstand drawer. Brandon had told me the wallet was inside. He said he had put it there for safekeeping. To an untrained eye, the drawer looked normal. But I have spent 40 years training my eyes to see what others miss. I pulled a pair of latex gloves from a box I kept hidden behind my medical journals. It might seem excessive to wear gloves in one's own home, but I needed to be objective. I needed to treat this not as my personal property, but as evidence in a case against two people I once loved. I opened the drawer. The wallet was there just as he said. But it was wrong. I picked it up by the corner. The leather was warm. It should have been cold if it had been sitting in a drawer all morning. This meant it had been handled recently, very recently. I carried it over to my desk, where the morning sun provided the unforgiving light I needed. I opened the wallet and looked at the slot for the Platinum Reserve card. It was back in its place, but it was inserted incorrectly. I have a system. I have always had a system. For 50 years, I have placed my credit cards with the magnetic strip facing inward towards the fold of the wallet to protect the data. It is a habit born of paranoia and professional caution. But this card was facing outward. The chip was exposed. To anyone else, this would be nothing, a meaningless detail. But in my line of work, a deviation from the pattern is the first sign of fraud. It was sloppy. It was the mark of an amateur who was in a rush, someone who did not respect the order of things. I pulled the card out and held it up to the light, tilting it back and forth. There it was, a smudge, a faint greasy oval on the matte black finish of the card right over the embossed numbers. I adjusted my glasses. It was a thumbprint, and not just any thumbprint. It had the distinct sheen of animal fat, bacon grease, the same bacon grease that had been sizzling in the pan downstairs less than 20 minutes ago. Tiffany. She had handled this card while she was cooking. She had been so excited, so arrogant in her victory, that she had not even bothered to wash her hands before touching the key to my life savings. It was disrespectful. It was filthy. It turned my stomach. I placed the card down on the desk and reached for my phone. My hands were steady now. The tremor I had faked at the breakfast table was gone. I opened the banking security app, the one that logs every single interaction with the account server. I needed to corroborate the physical evidence with digital footprints. I scrolled back through the log. 2:15 in the morning. Attempted login. Failed. I nodded to myself. That was the moment Brandon tried my birthday. That was the moment of their panic. 2:16 in the morning. Attempted login. Success. That was the moment they used Patricia's death date. There was no going back now. The timestamp was the final nail in the coffin. Until I saw that log entry, there was a microscopic part of me that wanted to believe I had dreamt it all. That maybe I was just a paranoid old man having a nightmare. But the digital log did not lie. It did not have emotions. It simply recorded the truth. My son and his wife had broken into my privacy and defiled the memory of his mother for money. I sat there for a long time staring at the glowing screen. The house was quiet now. I could hear the faint sound of the television downstairs. They were probably watching a morning talk show discussing their future, spending the money they thought they had secured. I had two choices. I could call the bank right now. I could report the card stolen. I could freeze the assets. I could walk downstairs and scream at them, throw them out of my house and cut them out of the will. It would be messy. There would be tears. Brandon would beg. Tiffany would lie. They would play the victims. They would say they were just borrowing it. They would say they intended to pay it back. And eventually, because I am a father, I might soften. I might let them stay. And they would learn nothing. They would just learn to be more careful next time. Or I could choose the second option. I looked at the picture of Patricia on my desk. She was smiling that knowing smile she always had when she knew I was working on a difficult case. She hated thieves, but she hated betrayal even more. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice. Leonard Ross Law Firm, how may I direct your call? Put me through to Leonard, I said. It is Desmond Cole. There was a click, and then a familiar gravelly voice came on the line. Desmond, I was not expecting to hear from you until our golf game on Sunday. Is everything all right? No, Leonard, I said. My voice was flat, devoid of any warmth. Everything is far from all right. There was a pause on the other end. Leonard had been my friend for 30 years. He knew that tone. He knew what it meant. What happened, Desmond? They did it, I said. They took the bait. Last night at 2 a.m, they accessed the account. Did they transfer the funds? Leonard asked, his voice shifting instantly from friend to attorney. Not yet, I replied. But they have the card, they have the PIN, and I just found the physical evidence in my wallet. They are planning to drain it. I suspect they will try to move the money within 48 hours. I heard the sound of a pen scratching on paper. Okay, Desmond. We talked about this scenario. If they have the card, we need to move fast. Do you want me to file a report? Do you want me to shut down the account? I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old paper and dust that filled my room. I thought about the bacon grease on the card. I thought about the fake smile on Tiffany's face. I thought about Brandon lying to my face about the roof. No, Leonard, I said softly. Do not shut it down. Desmond. Are you sure? Leonard asked. If we leave it open, they could empty it. Let them, I said. I want you to initiate the Sunflower Protocol. The line went silent. The Sunflower Protocol was the nuclear option. It was a legal trapdoor we had built into the trust fund bylaws a year ago. It was designed for a worst-case scenario, a scenario where the beneficiaries proved themselves to be not just irresponsible but criminally negligent. Sunflower, Leonard repeated. You are absolutely certain. Once we toggle that switch, there is no undoing it. If they touch that money, the automated clauses kick in. The house, the assets, the IRS notification. It will all happen automatically. It will destroy them, Desmond. I looked at the card on my desk one last time. I flipped it over. I could see my own reflection in the black plastic. I looked tired, but I looked resolved. They destroyed themselves, Leonard, I said. I am just signing the paperwork. Do it. Set the trigger. All right, Leonard said. I am logging into this trust interface now. The protocol is active. The next time that card is used for a transaction over $100, the system will execute the asset seizure and notify the authorities. Thank you, Leonard. Desmond. Leonard added, his voice softer now. Are you going to be safe in that house with them? I am the safest person in the world, I replied. Because I am the only one who knows the truth. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, feeling the weight of what I had just done. I had just authorized the destruction of my son's life. But as I put the card back into the wallet, ensuring the magnetic strip was facing the wrong way, just as I found it, I felt a strange sense of peace. I was not a father anymore. I was a judge, and the trial had just begun. I stood up and walked to the door. I had to go back downstairs. I had to continue the performance. I had to be the doddering old fool for just a little while longer. I unlocked the door and stepped out into the hallway. Hey, Dad! Brandon called out from the bottom of the stairs. His voice was cheerful, too cheerful. We were thinking of ordering pizza for dinner. To celebrate, you know, letting us help you. I looked down at him. He was smiling up at me, oblivious to the fact that the sword of Damocles was hanging directly over his head, held up by a single strand of horsehair. That sounds lovely, son, I called back, forcing a smile onto my face. I love pizza. I started down the stairs, one step at a time, descending into the pit of vipers, knowing that I was the one bringing the venom. The office of Leonard Ross is located on the 34th floor of a glass tower in downtown Seattle. It smells of mahogany and old leather, the kind of smell that usually makes me feel secure. But today, as I sat in the wingback chair watching the gray rain streak against the floor-to-ceiling windows, I felt nothing but a cold, hollow dread. Leonard sat across from me. We have been friends since law school. We have played golf together every Sunday for 20 years. I have never seen him look this uncomfortable. He adjusted his tie. He shuffled the papers on his desk. He looked everywhere except at my eyes. "It is worse than we thought," Desmond Leonard said softly. His voice was heavy with the weight of bad news. I nodded. I did not need him to sugarcoat it. I spent my life looking at bad numbers. I know that numbers do not lie, only people do. "Show me," I said. Leonard slid a thick manila folder across the polished wood of the desk. It made a heavy thud that sounded like a coffin lid closing. I opened it. The first page was a credit report for my son Brandon. The numbers were bleeding red. I put on my glasses and began to read. My son was not just broke, he was underwater. He was drowning. "He has a gambling problem," Leonard explained, pointing to a series of transactions. "But not at a casino. It is cryptocurrency. He bought into 3 different coins that were essentially pump and dump schemes. He leveraged everything he had. He took out personal loans. He maxed out his credit cards." I looked at the total. $120,000. "He lost $120,000 on internet magic beans," I said, my voice flat. "And that is just the beginning," Leonard continued. "He owes another $45,000 to credit card companies. The interest rates are predatory. He is paying the minimums by opening new cards to pay off the old ones. It is a house of cards, Desmond. One breath of wind and it all collapses." I turned the page. I saw the names of the creditors. Some of them were legitimate banks, but 2 of them were names I recognized from my days investigating money laundering. They were not banks. They were loan sharks operating under the guise of short-term lending agencies. These were the kind of people who did not send late notices in the mail. They sent men with baseball bats. "So he is stealing from me to pay them off," I whispered. "He is terrified. He is desperate," Leonard corrected. "But there is more." Leonard hesitated. He placed his hand over the next section of the file. "Desmond, you do not have to see this part. We can just focus on the finances." "Move your hand, Leonard." He sighed and pulled his hand away, revealing a stack of printed emails and chat logs. At the top was a photo of a receipt. It was a deposit for a travel agency. 2 first-class tickets to the Maldives. The dates were for next month. "The Maldives," I repeated. "My son is $160,000 in debt, and he is booking a vacation to the Maldives." "Not him," Leonard said quietly. "Her." I looked closer at the receipt. It was booked under Tiffany's name using the last remaining credit on Brandon's emergency card. And then I saw the chat logs. Leonard had his private investigator pull them from the cloud. They were conversations from a website called Sugar Baby Elite. I felt bile rise in my throat. I forced myself to read. Tiffany was chatting with a man named user GoldRush55. The timestamps were recent. Some were from when she was sitting in my living room watching television with Brandon. "I cannot wait to get out of here," she wrote. "My husband is a loser. He is broke. But do not worry, baby. I am securing the bag. His dad is senile and has a trust fund. As soon as we cash out, I am leaving him. Just wait for me." I closed the folder. I took off my glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose. The silence in the office was deafening. The only sound was the rain hitting the glass like bullets. "She is not opening a spa," I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "No," Leonard replied. "There is no business plan, no lease agreement. The $10,000 she asked you for. It was not for a franchise fee. It was likely to pay for her travel wardrobe or to hide money in her own private account before she files for divorce." I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the city below. People were rushing through the rain, tiny ants scurrying for cover. I felt a strange emotion welling up inside me. It was not anger. I was past anger. It was pity. "My son is a thief," I said to the glass. But he is also a fool. He is risking prison to steal money for a woman who despises him. He is robbing his father to buy a life for a wife who is already planning her exit strategy. He is being cuckolded, Leonard said brutally. And he is paying for the privilege with your money. I turned back to face my friend. Leonard looked worried. He leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. Desmond, we can stop this. We can call Brandon in here. We can show him these files. We can show him the chat logs. We can bail him out of the debt on the condition that he leaves her and goes to rehab for the gambling. We can save him. I stared at the folder. It would be so easy. I could write a check. I could clear the debt. I could hire the best divorce lawyers to crush Tiffany. I could save my son from the sharks and from the snake in his bed. That is what a father is supposed to do, right? Protect his child. But then I remembered the sound of his voice in the dark. Take it all. I remembered the lie about the roof. I remembered him handing me the pancakes, knowing he had just violated my trust and my privacy. If I save him now, I said slowly, I am not helping him. I am enabling him. If I pay off his debts, he will never learn the value of $1. If I show him the truth about Tiffany, he will not believe me. He will think I am meddling. He will resent me. He has to see it for himself. But the sharks, Leonard warned. They are dangerous. Let them come, I said. Let him feel the fear. Let him see who stands by him when the money runs out. I walked back to the desk and placed my hand on the folder. Do not intervene, Leonard. Stick to the plan. The Sunflower Protocol stays active. Leonard nodded slowly. He looked sad, but he understood. You are teaching him a hard lesson, Desmond. Experience is a hard teacher, I replied, picking up my coat. She gives the test first and the lesson afterwards. My son needs to fail this test so he can survive the rest of his life. I walked toward the door. Desmond, Leonard called out. What are you going to do when you go home? I am going to eat pizza, I said, and I am going to ask them how the spa business is going. I left the office and stepped into the elevator. As the numbers counted down, taking me back to the street level, I felt a cold resolve harden in my chest. The man who walked into that office was a worried father. The man walking out was an executioner. My son wanted to play the game of adulthood. He wanted to handle big money and high stakes. Well, he was about to learn that in the real world, when you gamble with money that isn't yours, you do not just lose your chips, you lose your hand. I walked out into the Seattle rain and let it wash over my face. It felt clean. It felt real, unlike the smiles waiting for me at home. I hailed a cab. It was time to go back to the theater and play my part in the final act. The stage was set. The villains were in place. All that was left was for the trapdoor to open. The dining room was quiet, except for the scraping of silverware against china. It was a sound that used to irritate me, but tonight it sounded like music. We were eating roast chicken. Tiffany had bought it from the gourmet grocery store and plated it to look like she had cooked it herself, but I saw the plastic container in the trash can. I did not care. I cut into the breast meat and took a large bite. It was dry and overcooked, but to me it tasted like victory. I chewed slowly, taking my time while I watched them. Brandon was pushing his peas around his plate, constructing little green hills and then destroying them with his fork. He had barely touched his wine. Tiffany was on her phone scrolling through something under the table, thinking I could not see the glow of the screen reflecting off her manicured nails. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. They were waiting. They were waiting for me to go to bed so they could plan their next move. They were waiting for the money to hit their account so they could start their new lives. I decided it was time to ruin their appetite. I cleared my throat. The sound was loud in the silent room. Brandon jumped slightly, and his fork clattered against the plate. Tiffany snapped her head up, slipping her phone into her lap. "Is everything okay, Dad?" she asked. Her voice was too high, too bright. "Do you need some water?" "No," I said, dabbing my mouth with the linen napkin. "I am fine. Better than fine, actually. I had a very productive day." "Oh," Brandon asked. He picked up his wine glass, his hand trembling slightly. "What did you do? Did you go for a walk in the park?" "No," I said. "I went to the bank." The reaction was instantaneous. Brandon froze the glass halfway to his mouth. Tiffany stopped chewing. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a second the mask of the dutiful daughter-in-law slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "The bank," she repeated slowly. "Why did you go to the bank, Desmond?" "I thought we agreed that Brandon and I were going to handle the finances from now on." I waved my hand dismissively, playing the part of the stubborn old man. I know. But I got to thinking about what you said this morning, about how forgetful I am. And then I saw a report on the news about hackers, cyber criminals stealing millions from retirees. It got me worried. Terrified, actually. I took a sip of water, letting them sweat. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. I continued. I went to the main branch downtown. I spoke to the manager. Nice fellow. I told him I wanted to close the trust account. Brandon choked. It was a violent, visceral reaction. He inhaled the red wine he was about to swallow, and it went straight down the wrong pipe. He doubled over, coughing and sputtering, red liquid spraying onto the white tablecloth like a crime scene. Tiffany slammed her hand on his back, but her eyes never left me. Her face had drained of all color, leaving her looking like a wax statue. "You did what she whispered." The sweetness was gone from her voice, replaced by a harsh rasp. "You closed the account." "Well, not yet," I said, calmly watching my son gasp for air. "Are you all right, Brandon? You really should be more careful." He waved me off his face, turning a deep shade of purple. He took a gulp of water and looked at me with sheer terror. "Dad, please tell me you did not withdraw the money. Please tell me the money is still there." "For now," I said. The relief that washed over them was palpable, but I wasn't done. I leaned in, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper, as if I were sharing a state secret. "But I told the manager I do not trust computers. I do not trust these plastic cards. Cash is king, that is what my father always said. So I told him to prepare the full balance in cash, $158,000. I am going to bring it home and put it in the floor safe in the basement. Only I know the combination. It is the only way to be safe." Tiffany looked like she was going to be sick. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. If I moved the money to cash and put it in a safe, they could not open the credit card they had stolen. Would be a worthless piece of plastic. Their ticket to the Maldives and their escape from the loan sharks would vanish. But these banks... I continued, shaking my head in frustration. "They are so bureaucratic. Do you know what they told me?" What? Brandon wheezed. "What did they tell you?" "They said they need 48 hours to gather that much cash," I said. "Security protocols, they called it. They have to order it from the Federal Reserve. Can you believe that? My own money and I have to wait 2 days to touch it." I saw the look that passed between them. It was a look of pure panic, but also of understanding. I had just given them a deadline. 48 hours, Tiffany said softly. "Yes," I replied. "They said I can come back on Friday morning to pick up the duffel bag. Until then, the account is frozen for withdrawals unless I show up in person. It is such a hassle. But at least after Friday, I will have the cash right here under my mattress, where no one can touch it." I picked up my knife and fork and cut another piece of chicken. "Anyway," I said, smiling at them, "I just thought you should know. Since you are worried about the roof and the spa, once the cash is here, we can pay for everything in $100 bills, just like the old days." I put the chicken in my mouth and chewed. Brandon looked at his watch. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was calculating. He was doing the math. Today was Wednesday. Friday morning was 36 hours away. But the bank would process the closure order sooner than that. If they wanted to use the card, they had to do it now. They had to do it before the bank froze the account for the cash withdrawal preparation. I had forced their hand. If they were hesitant before, if they were worried about getting caught now, they had no choice. Desperation is a powerful motivator. It makes people reckless. It makes them rush. And when people rush, they make mistakes. "I am not very hungry," Tiffany said abruptly, pushing her plate away. "I have a headache. I think I am going to go lie down." "Me too," Brandon said, standing up. His legs were shaky. "I need to make some calls. About the roof." "Of course," I said. "Go rest. You two work so hard." I watched them leave the dining room. They did not go upstairs to the bedroom. I saw them turn towards the den, where they thought they could whisper without being heard. I sat alone at the large table surrounded by the remnants of a family dinner that never really existed. I poured myself a glass of the wine Brandon had left behind. It was an expensive vintage one I had bought for my anniversary 5 years ago. They had opened it without asking. I took a sip. It was excellent. The clock was ticking. I had given them a 48-hour window, but I knew they wouldn't wait that long. The loan sharks were closing in, and now the bank was closing in. They felt the walls of the maze shrinking around them. They would strike tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest. I finished my wine and stood up. I began to clear the table. I washed the dishes by hand, scrubbing the plates until they squeaked. I wanted everything to be clean. I wanted the house to be in perfect order, because soon the storm was going to break, and when it did, I wanted to be standing on firm ground. I dried my hands and walked to the hallway. I could hear their muffled voices coming from the den. They were arguing. "We have to do it tonight," Tiffany hissed. "We cannot," Brandon argued. "He said the account is flagged for the withdrawal." "Only for cash, idiot," she snapped. "The electronic transfer will still work until the manager locks it. We have to go now. We have to hit the limit." I smiled. They were doing exactly what I predicted. I walked up the stairs to my room. I needed to get ready. I needed to make sure the cameras were recording. I needed to make sure the software was active. Tonight was the night. They thought they were racing against the bank. They did not know they were racing against a ghost who had already dug their graves and was just waiting for them to jump in. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a garden in the late afternoon. It is a heavy golden silence where the only sounds are the buzzing of bees and the rhythmic snip of my pruning shears. I was out in the front yard tending to Patricia's prize-winning rose bushes. She loved these flowers. She used to say that they were the perfect metaphor for life because you cannot have the beauty of the bloom without the danger of the thorns. I was carefully cutting away the dead wood, trying to shape the chaotic growth into something manageable, which I suppose was exactly what I was trying to do with my family. I was on my knees, hidden partially by the large hydrangea bush near the driveway, when I heard it. It wasn't the sound of a neighbor returning from work. It was the low, aggressive rumble of a modified engine. A matte black sedan with tinted windows rolled slowly down our quiet suburban street. It looked like a shark swimming in a koi pond. It did not belong here among the minivans and the manicured lawns. The car slowed to a crawl as it approached my driveway. I froze. My instincts, honed from years of investigating organized crime, told me to stay low. I watched through the gaps in the leaves. Brandon was standing by the garage door. He had his phone to his ear, and he was pacing back and forth, looking agitated. He did not see the car until it was right in front of him. The rear window of the sedan rolled down. A thick arm covered in ink hung out of the window. I could not see the face inside, but I saw the hand. It was holding a rock wrapped in white paper and secured with a rubber band. Brandon stopped pacing. He lowered his phone. He looked like a deer staring into the headlights of a semi-truck. The arm swung back and tossed the rock. It didn't hit Brandon. It wasn't meant to. It landed with a heavy, dry crack on the concrete driveway right between his feet. A warning shot. The car didn't stop. The window rolled up and the engine roared as they peeled away, leaving a cloud of exhaust fumes drifting over my roses. I stayed perfectly still. I watched my son. He stood there for a long moment staring at the rock as if it were a live grenade. His hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped his phone. Slowly, painfully, he bent down and picked it up. He pulled the rubber band off and unfolded the paper. I was too far away to read the text, but I didn't need to. I saw Brandon read it. I saw the blood drain from his face so completely that his skin turned the color of old ash. He staggered back against the garage door, clutching his chest. He looked like he was about to vomit. He crumpled the paper in his fist and shoved it into his pocket. Then he looked around wildly, scanning the windows of the neighbors, scanning the street, scanning the front yard. He didn't see me behind the bushes. He thought he was alone with his terror. He turned and ran inside the house, slamming the door behind him. I waited a full minute before I stood up. My knees popped. I brushed the dirt off my trousers and picked up the rock he had left behind on the driveway. It was just a piece of gravel from a landscaping supply store. Cheap, brutal, effective. I walked to the house, entering through the side door that led to the mudroom. The house was quiet again, but the atmosphere had changed. The air, felt charged with electricity, like the moments before a thunderstorm breaks. I moved softly through the kitchen. I could hear voices coming from the living room. They weren't whispering anymore. The pretense of secrecy was gone, replacing by raw panic. I stood in the hallway just out of sight. "You are lying," Tiffany screamed. Her voice was shrill, hysterical. "You told me you had more time. You told me the guys gave you until the end of the month." "They changed the deal," Brandon yelled back. His voice was cracking, breaking under the strain. "Did you see that car, Tiff? Did you see them? They know where we live. They know where you sleep." I heard the sound of paper being smoothed out. Brandon must have shown her the note. 24 hours, she read aloud. Her voice trembled. "Or your finger. They are going to cut off your finger, Brandon. Oh my God. This is real. This is actually happening." "I am sorry," Brandon sobbed. "I am so sorry. I thought the crypto would bounce back. I thought I could fix it." "Shut up," Tiffany snapped. "I do not care about your apologies. I care about my safety. If they come back, they won't just hurt you. They will hurt me. I am not going to be collateral damage for your stupidity." There was a silence, then a sound of heavy breathing. "We have to do it tonight," Tiffany said. Her voice was cold now, deadly serious. "We cannot," Brandon whimpered. "Dad said the cash won't be ready until Friday." "Screw the cash," she hissed. "We cannot wait for the cash. We have to use the card. We have to go to the ATM tonight and hit the daily limit, and then we transfer the rest online. We drain it all, tonight." "But the bank," Brandon argued weakly. "Dad said the account might be flagged." "He is a senile old man," Tiffany spat. "He probably imagined the whole thing about the bank flags, or he lied. It doesn't matter. We have no choice. We take the money tonight, we pay off the sharks tomorrow morning, and then we leave." "Leave?" Brandon asked. "Yes. We take what is left, and we go to the Maldives early. We disappear until this blows over." I leaned my head back against the wall. There it was. The timeline had shifted. I had hoped to drag this out until Friday to let them sweat a little more, but the sharks had accelerated the schedule. The predators outside had spooked the scavengers inside. I felt a strange pang of sadness, not for the money, but for the realization that my son was truly cornered. He wasn't acting out of greed anymore, but out of mortal fear. And yet, Instead of coming to me, instead of confessing and asking for help, he was choosing to rob me. He was choosing the path of betrayal even when faced with violence. He trusted his wife's toxic plan more than he trusted his father's mercy. That was the final confirmation I needed. There was no saving him. He had to fall. I heard footsteps approaching the hallway. I quickly moved back into the mudroom and picked up my pruning shears, pretending to clean the blades with a rag. Brandon burst into the room. He looked like a ghost. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, his shirt soaked with sweat. He stopped when he saw me. "Oh," he breathed. "Dad, you are here." "Yes, son," I said, looking up calmly. "Just finishing up the roses. Did you hear a car outside earlier? Sounded like a hot rod." "Noisy things." Brandon flinched. He looked at me, searching my face for any sign that I knew about the threat. "Yeah," he stammered. Just some teenagers driving fast. It is nothing." "Are you all right?" I asked. "You look pale." "I am fine," he lied. "Just a stomachache. Something I ate." "Well, take it easy," I said, turning back to my tools. "I am going to wash up and go to my study. I have some old letters from your mother I want to read. I might turn in early tonight." "Okay, Dad," Brandon said. His voice was eager. "Yeah, you should rest. Get a good night's sleep." He wanted me out of the way. He wanted the house to be dark. I watched him hurry back to the living room to report to his commander. I placed the shears on the shelf. Tonight was the night. They were going to make their move, and I had to be ready. I had to ensure the cameras were rolling. I had to ensure the software was live. I walked up the stairs, not as a father, but as a witness. The curtain was rising on the final act, and unlike them, I knew exactly how this tragedy was going to end. I walked into my study and turned the brass lock until it clicked. This room was the only sanctuary left in the house, the only territory Tiffany had not colonized with her scented candles and beige throw pillows. It smelled of old paper pipe tobacco and the lavender sachet my wife Patricia used to keep in her knitting basket. I inhaled deeply, letting the scent fill my lungs. This was not just an office. It was a command center. For 40 years, I sat at this mahogany desk, dismantling corporate empires and exposing white-collar criminals. Today, I was about to dismantle something much smaller, but infinitely more painful. I sat down in my leather chair, the leather groaning under my weight like an old friend greeting me. I opened my laptop. It was not the consumer-grade tablet I used to play Sudoku in the living room. This was my work machine, a beast of a computer, encrypted with military-grade security. I plugged in the hard drive I kept in the false bottom of my humidor. The screen flickered to life. I navigated to the banking surveillance software I had installed weeks ago. It was a mirrored system linked directly to the trust fund's backend. On the screen, I could see everything in real time. I saw the balance sitting there, innocent and vulnerable, $158,042. I saw the authorized user list, and I saw the trigger protocols glowing in green text. Sunflower protocol active. Status standing by. I typed in a command string that would override the bank's standard fraud alerts for the first attempt. This was crucial. Usually, if a card is used for a massive transaction at midnight, the bank blocks it immediately to protect the customer. But I did not want them blocked. I wanted them to succeed. I wanted the transaction to go through just far enough to trigger the legal consequences before the trap snapped shut. I was essentially disabling the safety net so that when they fell, they would hit the concrete. With the digital trap set, I turned my attention to the physical world. I opened the top drawer of my desk and took out a sheet of heavy cream-colored stationery. I uncapped my fountain pen the Mont Blanc Patricia had given me for our 30th anniversary. My hand hovered over the paper. "What do you say to the son you are about to destroy? Do you apologize? Do you explain?" No. I decided. Explanations are for people who deserve them. I wrote 3 sentences. The ink flowed black and permanent onto the page. I did not sign it Dad. I signed it Desmond. The father in me was already grieving, but the man writing this letter was done. I waited for the ink to dry, blowing on it gently, just as Patricia used to do when she wrote thank you cards. Then I folded the paper once and slipped it into an envelope. I wrote Brandon on the front. I stood up and walked to the master bedroom. I placed the envelope on my pillow. It would be the first thing they found when they inevitably came in here to loot the rest of my valuables after I was gone. It was not just a letter. It was a tombstone. Now came the performance. I went to the closet and pulled down my old overnight bag. I threw in a few shirts, a toothbrush, and a pair of pajamas. I did not need them, but the bag had to look full. Details matter. If the bag looked too light, Tiffany would notice. She noticed everything except her own cruelty. I zipped the bag shut and threw my heavy wool coat over my arm. I looked in the mirror one last time. I ruffled my hair to look a bit more disheveled, a bit more confused. I opened the bedroom door and walked out onto the landing. I could hear them downstairs. The television was on loud, but they weren't watching it. They were pacing. I could hear the floorboards creaking under Brandon's nervous steps. I descended the stairs slowly, letting the bag thump against the steps. "Brandon, Tiffany," I called out. They appeared at the bottom of the stairs almost instantly. They looked like 2 starving dogs hearing the dinner bell. Dad, Brandon said, his eyes darting to the bag in my hand. "Where are you going?" I reached the bottom step and sighed, leaning heavily on the banister. "Oh, I forgot to tell you. I had a call from the Veterans Association earlier. Old Jenkins passed away last night." Who, Tiffany asked. She didn't care. She just wanted to know if this affected their timeline. "Jenkins," I repeated. "He was my radio operator in '72. Good man. The boys are gathering at the lodge tonight for a memorial toast. They want me to be there. We are going to drink cheap whiskey and tell lies about how brave we were." I paused, looking from one to the other. "I think I am going to stay over at the lodge tonight," I continued. "It gets late and you know how my eyes are with night driving. They have cots in the back. It will be like the old barracks." I saw the look they exchanged. It was electric. If I was gone for the night, the house was theirs. The card was theirs. They wouldn't have to sneak around. They wouldn't have to worry about me waking up and coming downstairs. I was handing them the keys to the castle and opening the drawbridge. "Oh, Dad, that is so sad about your friend," Tiffany said, putting on her best sympathetic face. "You should definitely go. You need to be with your friends. Do not worry about us. We will hold down the fort." "Yeah," Pop Brandon added. "Take your time. Don't rush back in the morning either. Sleep in. You deserve it." They were practically pushing me out the door. "Thanks, kids," I said, patting Brandon on the shoulder. He flinched. His muscles were tight as wire. I left some cash on the counter for pizza. "Lock up tight. You know how dangerous the world is these days." I walked to the front door. I put on my coat, fumbling with the buttons just enough to sell the act of frailty. I picked up my bag. "Good night," I said. "Good night, Dad," they chorused. I stepped out into the cool evening air and closed the door behind me. I listened. I heard the lock click. And then less than 2 seconds later, I heard a whoop of joy from inside the house. It was muffled, but distinct. It was the sound of a high five. I walked to my car, a sensible beige sedan that blended into the pavement. I put the bag in the passenger seat. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway slowly. I saw the curtains in the living room twitch. They were watching me leave, making sure I was really gone. I drove down the street, keeping my speed steady. I turned the corner and kept driving until I was 3 blocks away. I pulled into the empty parking lot of the community park. It was dark here. Perfect. I killed the engine. The silence rushed back in, filling the car. I was not going to the Veterans Lodge. Jenkins had been dead for 10 years. I was going nowhere. I reached over and opened the laptop again. The screen glowed blue in the dark cabin of the car, illuminating my face. I connected to the house security system. The camera feed from the living room popped up. There they were. Brandon was hugging Tiffany. He was laughing a manic, desperate laugh. Tiffany was already pulling on her coat. She was holding my wallet. She was waving it in the air like a trophy. I watched them on the screen like a director watching a movie he had written. "Go ahead," I whispered to the pixelated figures. "Run. The finish line is right there." I saw them rush out the front door. The camera in the driveway showed them jumping into Brandon's car. They peeled out of the driveway, ignoring the stop sign at the end of the street. They were heading for the ATM. They were heading for the slaughter. I sat back in my seat and waited. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. I sat in the darkness of my car, watching the blue glow of my laptop screen. The live feed from the living room camera showed a masterclass in greed. The moment the sound of my engine faded down the street, the atmosphere in the house shifted instantly, from respectful silence to chaotic energy. Tiffany did not even wait for me to be out of the neighborhood. She spun around on her heels and snatched my car keys from the bowl on the entryway table. "You drive," she barked at Brandon. Her voice was no longer the sweet melodic tone she used when asking for favors. It was sharp and guttural. Brandon was standing by the window, wringing his hands. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, terrified of the fall, but even more terrified of the person pushing him. "I can't," he stammered. "I had too much wine at dinner." "I am shaking, Tiff. Look at my hands. Give me the keys," then she snapped, snatching them back. "You are useless. Absolutely useless. Get in the car, Brandon. We are going to the drive-through ATM on 4th. It is dark, it is quiet, no one will see us." I switched the feed to the dashboard camera inside Brandon's car. I had installed it months ago for insurance purposes, but tonight, it was my window into their souls. The audio crackled to life as they slammed the doors shut. The engine roared. Tiffany drove like she lived, aggressively and without regard for consequences. She peeled out of the driveway, the tires screeching against the wet asphalt. "Slow down," Brandon pleaded, gripping the handle above the passenger door. "If we get pulled over with the stolen card, we are done." "It is not stolen," Tiffany hissed, eyes glued to the rain-slicked road. "It is ours. It is family money. We are just taking an advance on your inheritance." "Inheritance," Brandon muttered. He looked out the window at the passing streetlights, his face illuminated in rhythmic flashes of orange sodium light. "He is not dead yet, Tiffany. He is just at a meeting. He is still my father." "Oh, spare me the morality play," Tiffany laughed. It was a cruel sound. "He is 72 years old, Brandon. He has lived his life. He had his career. He had his big house. What does he need $150,000 for? To buy more cardigan sweaters. To pay for premium cable channels he falls asleep watching." "He worked for it," Brandon said softly. "It is his savings." "And you are his son," she countered. "You are his legacy. Do you think he wants his legacy to be a son with 9 fingers because he couldn't pay off a loan shark? Do you think he wants to see us living in a shelter? We are doing him a favor, Brandon. We are saving him the heartbreak of seeing you fail. Again." I listened to her twist the logic. It was fascinating in a morbid way. She was not just stealing my money, she was rewriting reality to make herself the hero of the story. She was convincing my weak-willed son that robbing me was actually an act of mercy. "But the bank," Brandon argued, his voice gaining a little strength. "Dad said he flagged the account for withdrawal. What if the card doesn't work?" "It will work," she insisted, stepping on the gas. "He said he ordered the cash. That means the money is sitting there liquid. The electronic transfer limits might be tricky, but the ATM withdrawal will trigger a different system. We pull the daily maximum, which is 3,000. Then we use the mobile app to transfer the rest to the offshore crypto wallet you set up. Once it is in crypto, it is gone, untraceable. By the time the bank opens on Friday, we will be on a beach in the Maldives, and he will be crying to the FDIC. I shook my head in the dark. She was confident. She thought she understood how the banking system worked. She thought she was smarter than the forensic accountant who wrote the book on tracing hidden assets. The car swerved around a corner. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the roof of their car and mine. "I feel sick," Brandon said, clutching his stomach. "This feels wrong, Tiff. Maybe we should just tell him. Maybe if we told him about the sharks, he would help us." "He won't help you," she screamed, slamming her hand on the steering wheel. "He hates you, Brandon. Have you not noticed? He looks at you with disappointment every single day. He thinks you are a failure. He thinks you are weak. If you tell him you lost another 100 grand on crypto, he won't write a check. He will write you out of the will. Is that what you want?" Brandon went silent. She had hit his greatest fear. The fear that I did not love him. The tragedy was that I did love him. I loved him enough to let him suffer this so he could finally see her for what she was. "We are here," she said abruptly. On my screen, I saw the surroundings change. They pulled into the parking lot of the 4th Street Bank branch. It was 11:30 at night. The area was deserted. The bank was a dark monolith of brick and glass surrounded by shadows. The only light came from the ATM kiosk, standing like a lonely sentinel in the drive-through lane. Its screen glowed with a harsh artificial green light cutting through the rain. Tiffany pulled the car up close to the machine. She put the car in park, but kept the engine running. "Give me the card," she demanded, holding out her hand. Brandon hesitated. He reached into his pocket and pulled out my wallet. He held it for a second, his thumb brushing over the worn leather. "Just do it, Brandon," Tiffany whispered, her voice dropping to a seductive hiss. "Do it for us. Do it for our future. Imagine the sun on your face. Imagine no debt. Imagine being free." Brandon let out a long, shaky breath. He opened the wallet and pulled out the black Platinum Reserve card. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered so quietly the microphone almost didn't pick it up. He handed the card to her. Tiffany snatched it like a starving animal snatching a piece of meat. She rolled down the window. The cold wind and rain blew into the car, soaking her sleeve, but she didn't care. She leaned out towards the machine. I watched on my laptop screen, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. This was it. The point of no return. They had arrived at the slaughterhouse and they were voluntarily walking through the gates. I saw her arm extend. I saw the card slide into the slot. I saw the machine swallow it. "Here we go," I said to the empty car. The screen on the ATM flashed. "Please enter PIN." Tiffany turned back to Brandon. Her eyes were wild with adrenaline. "Say it," she commanded. "Say the date." 04. Brandon recited, his voice hollow. 1222. April 12th, 2022. The date my wife died. The date they were using to kill their relationship with me forever. Tiffany turned back to the keypad. I watched her finger hover over the buttons. She pressed the first digit, then the second. I leaned closer to my screen. The trap was armed. The trigger was under her finger, and she was pressing down. I watched the pixelated feed on my laptop screen, holding my breath. The rain was lashing down around the isolated ATM booth, blurring the edges of the video, but the expression on Tiffany's face was crystal clear. It was a look of pure, unadulterated greed. She punched in the numbers with a violence that made me flinch. 041222. The date my wife took her last breath. The date that should have been sacred. Tiffany used it like a crowbar to pry open a vault. For an agonizing few seconds, the machine processed the request. The screen displayed a spinning hourglass. I could see Tiffany tapping her long acrylic nails against the plastic casing of the machine. "Come on," she hissed. "Come on, you piece of junk." Inside the car, Brandon was leaning halfway out the window, his face pale and slick with rain. "Did it work?" he called out over the sound of the wind. Then the hourglass disappeared. The screen flashed a bright, inviting green. Tiffany let out a scream that sounded more like a wild animal than a human being. "It worked," she yelled, spinning around to face Brandon. "It worked, baby. Look at the balance. $158,000. It is all there. Every single cent." Brandon slumped back in his seat, covering his face with his hands. I could see his shoulders shaking. It was relief. Pathetic, desperate relief. He thought he was saved. He thought the nightmare was over. He had no idea that the real nightmare was just beginning. Tiffany turned back to the screen. She was vibrating with adrenaline. She didn't just want the money, she wanted to drain the life out of me. She pressed the button for withdrawal. "I am taking the $2,000 cash limit first," she shouted over her shoulder, "just to have walking around money. Then I am transferring the rest. Goodbye, debt. Goodbye, old man." I watched her finger hover over the keypad. She selected the amount. $2,000. Then she hit confirm. The machine whirred. It was the mechanical sound of rollers moving cash, the sound of gears turning. To Tiffany, it must have sounded like a symphony. She held her purse open, ready to catch the bills. She was smiling so wide it looked painful. But then the whirring stopped. It didn't slow down. It didn't finish with the satisfying click of the dispenser opening. It just cut out. Dead silence. Tiffany frowned. She slapped the side of the machine. "What the hell?" she muttered. "Give me my money." Then the screen changed. The inviting green light vanished, instantly replaced by a stark, angry crimson red. It was a color that cut through the rainy night like a warning flare. The text, that appeared on the screen was not the usual technical error message. It was not telling her to contact her bank. It was a message I had drafted with Leonard specifically for this moment. The letters were bold and black against the red background. Security alert. Unauthorized access detected. Sunflower protocol initiated. Tiffany stared at it. She blinked. She didn't understand. She pressed the cancel button. Nothing happened. She pressed the clear button. Nothing happened. "What is going on?" Brandon yelled from the car. "Tiff, why do you not have the cash? It is frozen," she screamed, panic rising in her voice. The screen went red. "It says Sunflower Protocol. What the hell is a Sunflower Protocol?" She reached for the card slot. "Give me the card back," she yelled at the machine, clawing at the plastic lip. "Give it back." The machine did not give it back. Inside the mechanism, I heard a distinct mechanical crunch. It was the internal shredder engaging. The bank's security system, recognizing a flagged stolen card, had just destroyed the chip. "No," Tiffany shrieked. "No, no, no." Suddenly, the screen changed again. The red background remained, but new text scrolled across it. "Access to trust, assets revoked. Geolocation logged. Identity confirmed. Law enforcement notified." Tiffany stumbled back from the machine as if it had burned her. She looked at the camera lens built into the ATM console. For a second, she looked right at me, right through the digital feed. She looked terrified. "Brandon," she screamed, running back to the car. "It ate the card. It knows. It knows who we are." She dove into the driver's seat, slamming the door so hard the car shook. "Drive," Brandon yelled. "Just drive." But before she could put the car in gear, a sound filled the small cabin of their vehicle. It was a sound loud enough that I could hear it through the dashboard camera microphone. Ting, ting, ting. It was Brandon's phone. He pulled it out of his pocket, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped it. The screen lit up his face in a ghostly white glow. "Is it the transfer?" Tiffany asked, breathless. "Did the transfer go through before the machine locked up?" Brandon didn't answer. He stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "What is it?" Tiffany demanded, grabbing his arm. "Tell me we got the money." "It is not the bank," Brandon whispered. His voice was barely a squeak. "It is an email. From Dad's lawyer. Leonard." "Read it," Tiffany commanded. Brandon swallowed hard. He read the subject line aloud. "Notification of eviction and asset seizure." There was a silence in the car that was heavier than the grave. He opened the email. Mr. Cole Brandon read, tears starting to stream down his face. "This automated message confirms that an attempt was made to access the Patricia Cole Memorial Trust using a compromised credential. Per the terms of the trust, which you triggered by entering the specific distress code, PM. The following actions have been executed immediately. 1. The residential property at 42 Oak Lane is now the legal property of the Veterans Charity Foundation. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." Brandon stopped. He couldn't breathe. "Keep reading," Tiffany whispered. Her voice was trembling. 2, he continued, choking on the words. "A forensic audit of your personal finances has been automatically forwarded to the IRS and the State District Attorney regarding the misuse of senior funds. 3. The $150,000 remains secure and inaccessible." Brandon dropped the phone. It fell into the center console with a dull thud. He knew everything Brandon said, staring out at the rain. He knew the whole time. The bank visit. The cash withdrawal story. It was all a lie. It was a trap, Tiff. And we walked right into it. Tiffany didn't scream this time. She didn't rage. She just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She stared at the red glow of the ATM screen in the rearview mirror. The red light bathed them in the color of their guilt. "He cannot do this," she whispered. "He is my father-in-law. He cannot just make us homeless." "He just did," Brandon said. "And he did it without even leaving his chair." I watched them from my car parked 3 blocks away. I closed the laptop. The show was over. The trap had sprung. The mouse was caught. But there was no satisfaction in it, only a deep, hollow ache. I had saved my fortune, but I had lost my son. I started my car. The engine purred to life. I had to go back to the house. I had to meet them there. The final confrontation was waiting, and this time I wouldn't be playing the part of the senile old man. I would be playing the judge. The blue light from the smartphone screen was the only thing illuminating the interior of the car. It cast a ghostly pallor over Brandon's face, making him look like a corpse that had just been startled awake. His thumb hovered over the attachment icon. It was a video file simply labeled "For my son." He did not want to press it. His hand was trembling so violently that the phone was vibrating against the center console, but he knew he had no choice. He had to know. He had to see the final mechanism of the trap we had built for him. He tapped the screen. The video player opened. There was a moment of buffering, a spinning white circle that felt like a countdown to an execution. Then the image resolved. It was not a lawyer in a suit. It was not me. It was Patricia. I watched the recognition hit Brandon like a physical blow. He made a sound, a low, strangled whimper that got caught in his throat. The video had been recorded 2 years ago in the guest bedroom we had converted into a hospice suite during her final weeks. She was sitting in her favorite armchair, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. Her face was gaunt, the cheekbones protruding sharply beneath skin that looked as fragile as parchment. She had lost her hair from the chemotherapy and was wearing a soft silk scarf around her head. But her eyes were the same. They were fierce, intelligent, and currently burning with a mixture of love and disappointment that transcended the grave. "Hello, Brandon." "Hello, Tiffany." Her voice was raspy, weak from the medication, but the authority in it was undeniable. Tiffany stopped breathing. She leaned in from the driver's seat, staring at the dead woman Shun who was speaking to them from the cloud. "If you are watching this video," Patricia continued, looking directly into the camera lens, "it means that I am gone. It also means that your father is still alive. But most importantly, it means that you have just entered the date of my death into the keypad of the emergency credit card." On the screen, Patricia paused to cough. She took a sip of water from a cup with a straw. It was a painful human moment that made the judgment feel even more real. "I asked your father to set up this system," she said, wiping her mouth. "I begged him. He did not want to do it. He wanted to believe that you would never sink this low. He wanted to believe that his son was a man of honor, and that his daughter-in-law was a woman of integrity. But I am a mother, Brandon, and a mother knows her child's weaknesses better than anyone. I knew that when the going got tough, you would look for the easy way out. And I knew that you, Tiffany, would be the one pointing the way." In the car, Tiffany flinched as if Patricia had reached out of the screen and slapped her. "You thought that PIN code was a key," Patricia said, her voice gaining strength. "You thought it was the combination to a vault. But it was not. It was a test. A test of character. And I am so incredibly sorry to say that by seeing this video, you have failed that test." Brandon was crying now. Silent tears were streaming down his face, dripping onto his expensive leather jacket. He touched the screen, caressing his mother's image with his thumb. "Mom," he whispered. "Mom, I am sorry." The Patricia in the video shook her head slowly, as if answering him. "The money you tried to take is gone," she said. "It has been secured by the bank. But that is not the only thing you have lost tonight. You see the house you are living in, the house you think you are going to inherit. It belongs to the trust, and the trust has a very specific morality clause." She leaned forward, and the camera zoomed in slightly on her intense eyes. "Clause 7B," she recited from memory. "Upon the confirmed attempt of any beneficiary to defraud the grantor or misuse funds via the emergency distress code, the residency rights of said beneficiary are immediately revoked." Brandon froze. Tiffany let out a gasp. "That means," Patricia continued, her voice hard as steel, "the house is no longer yours. As of the moment you pressed enter on that keypad, the deed to the property at 42 Oak Lane was automatically transferred to the Veterans Charity Foundation. It is a donation, a gift to men and women who understand the meaning of duty and honor, things you clearly have forgotten." "No," Tiffany whimpered. "No, she cannot do that. That is our house." "You have 1 hour," Patricia said. 1 hour from the timestamp of the transaction, before the smart locks on the doors engage and the security codes are wiped. Get your things. Take what you can carry, and then leave. Do not come back. Do not bother your father. He has endured enough." Patricia sat back in the chair. Her energy was fading. She looked tired. So incredibly tired. "Brandon," she said, her voice softening just a fraction. "I loved you from the moment I held you in the hospital. I wanted the world for you. But you cannot buy a good life with stolen money. You have to earn it. I hope one day when you are standing on your own 2 feet, you will understand why I did this. I did this to save you from yourself." She looked at the camera one last time. "Goodbye, my son. Be a better man than this." The screen went black. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the rain hammering against the roof of the car, a relentless drumbeat of reality. Brandon stared at the black rectangle in his hand. He looked like a man who had just watched his own soul being dissected. Then the spell broke. Tiffany let out a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. She pounded her fists against the steering wheel. She kicked the dashboard. She thrashed in her seat like a trapped animal. She took the house, she shrieked. The witch. The absolute witch. She took the house, Brandon. We are homeless. We are broke and we are homeless. She scrambled to open the door. She practically fell out of the car onto the wet pavement. She didn't care about the rain anymore. She didn't care about her hair or her clothes. She fell to her knees in a puddle of oil and water and looked up at the sky. "It is not fair," she wailed. Her voice echoed off the brick walls of the bank. "We were so close. It is not fair." Brandon stepped out of the car slowly. He walked around to where his wife was kneeling in the gutter. He didn't offer her a hand. He didn't try to comfort her. He just looked down at her with dead eyes. "It is fair," he said softly. His voice was devoid of emotion. "It is exactly what we deserve, Tiff." Mom was right. "Shut up," Tiffany screamed, scrambling to her feet, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. "Do not you dare take her side. We have to go back. We have to get to the house before the locks change. We have to get my jewelry. We have to get my clothes." "Drive, Brandon. Drive!" She lunged for the driver's side door, but Brandon didn't move. He stood in the rain, letting the water soak him to the bone, washing away the scent of the tequila, washing away the lies. "You drive," he said, tossing her the keys. "I am walking." "What?" Tiffany stared at him. "Are you crazy? It is 3 miles. We have less than an hour." "I do not care," Brandon said. "I do not want to be in a car with you. I do not want to be in a house with you. I am done." He turned and started walking away from the bank, away from the money, away from the wife who had led him off the cliff. He walked into the darkness of the rainy night, leaving her screaming his name in the empty parking lot. I watched it all from my car. I watched my son finally find a shred of dignity in the wreckage of his life. And I watched Tiffany alone and hysterical, realizing that she was not the main character of this story. She was just the villain. And the villain always loses in the end. I put the car in gear. I had one stop to make before I went back to the empty house. I needed to visit the cemetery. I needed to tell Patricia that it worked. I needed to tell her that she was right. I stood on the front porch of the house that I had bought 40 years ago. The rain was still falling, but now it was illuminated by the strobing red and blue lights of 2 police cruisers parked in my driveway. To my left stood Leonard holding a black umbrella that shielded us both from the downpour. To my right stood Sheriff Miller, a man I had known since we were both playing high school football. He stood with his arms crossed, his face grim. Behind us, 2 private security contractors from the trust management firm were already changing the digital locks on the front door. The beep of their drills sounded like a countdown. We did not have to wait long. The sound of Brandon's car engine roaring down the street shattered the rhythmic quiet of the rain. Tiffany was driving like a maniac. She swerved into the driveway, narrowly missing the bumper of the police cruiser. She slammed on the brakes, and the car skidded on the wet concrete, coming to a halt just inches from the garage door. The driver's door flew open. Tiffany burst out into the rain. She did not look like the composed socialite she pretended to be. Her hair was plastered to her skull, her mascara was running in dark streaks down her cheeks, and her eyes were wild with panic and rage. She saw the police. She saw the security guards. And then she saw me. Her shock lasted only a second before it curdled into pure, venomous anger. She charged up the walkway, ignoring the police officer who stepped forward to intercept her. "You!" she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You evil old man! You did this! You set us up!" She tried to push past the officer, but he held her back firmly. She struggled against his grip, screaming over his shoulder at me. "It is a trap," she yelled to anyone who would listen, turning her head to the sheriff. "Officer, arrest him. He is a fraud. He told us to take the money. He gave us permission. He is lying to you. He is senile. He does not know what he is saying." I stood perfectly still on the porch, looking down at her. From this vantage point, she looked small. She looked pathetic. Desmond Leonard whispered beside me, "Do not engage. Let the sheriff handle it." "No," I said softly. "I need to finish this." I took a step forward, moving out from under the umbrella and into the rain. The water felt cold on my face, but I welcomed it. "I am not senile, Tiffany," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and carried easily over the sound of the rain. "And I am certainly not a liar." "You are," she screamed, struggling against the officer's restraint. "You told us this morning to handle the finances. You gave us the authority. And then you gamed the system to make us look like criminals. You lured us into a trap, Desmond. You are sick." She was good. I had to give her that. Even now, caught red-handed, she was trying to spin the narrative, trying to use my age against me, trying to paint herself as the victim of a confused, elderly man. If I had been anyone else, it might have worked. But she forgot who I used to be. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. "I did not lure you anywhere," I said. "I simply opened a door. You chose to walk through it. And as for permission, well, I think we should let the record speak for itself." I tapped the screen, opening the audio file I had recorded the night before. I turned the volume up to the maximum. The sound of the recording cut through the night air. It was slightly fuzzy, but the voices were unmistakable. "Take it all out," Brandon's voice whispered from the phone speakers. "There is over $100,000 on it." Tiffany went still. Her eyes widened. Then came her voice, clear and sharp. "Do it quickly. He is asleep. The old man is stone deaf anyway. He won't hear a thing." I paused the recording. The silence that followed was heavier than the rain. The sheriff looked at Tiffany with disgust. Leonard adjusted his glasses. Even the security guards stopped drilling to listen. "Stone deaf," I repeated, looking straight into her eyes. "That is what you said, isn't it, Tiffany?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked from the phone to me, her face crumbling as the reality of the situation crashed down on her. The lie she had just told the police about me giving permission had been instantly obliterated by her own voice conspiring to rob me while I slept. "That recording," Leonard said, stepping forward, his voice sharp and professional, "is admissible evidence of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. And since the amount attempted to be stolen exceeds $100,000, we are looking at a Class B felony." Tiffany shook her head frantically. "No," she whimpered. "No, it was just talk. We didn't mean it. We were just borrowing it." Sheriff Miller stepped forward. He placed a hand on his belt. "Tiffany Cole," he said, his voice booming, "you are under arrest for attempted grand larceny and unauthorized access of a protected trust." He pulled the handcuffs from his belt. The metallic ratchet sound as he cuffed her wrists behind her back was the loudest sound in the world. Tiffany screamed. It wasn't a word, just a raw sound of denial. She thrashed as the officer turned her around and marched her toward the cruiser. "Brandon," she yelled, looking back at the street. "Brandon, help me. Tell them." I looked up. Brandon was standing at the end of the driveway. He must have walked or taken a cab after he left her at the bank. He was soaking wet, his expensive jacket ruined his hair matted to his forehead. He stood there like a statue, watching his wife being shoved into the back of a police car. He did not move. He did not speak. He just watched. Tiffany's face was pressed against the glass of the cruiser window, her mouth moving in silent screams as the sheriff closed the door. The blue lights reflected in Brandon's eyes, making him look like a ghost. Sheriff Miller walked back to the porch. He tipped his hat to me. "I am sorry it had to come to this, Desmond," he said. "We will need a formal statement from you in the morning." "Thank you, Jim," I said. "I will be there." The cruiser pulled away, the tires splashing through the puddles, taking the toxicity that had poisoned my home for 3 years away with it. Now it was just me, Leonard, and Brandon. My son walked slowly up the driveway. He didn't look at the security guards. He didn't look at the empty spot where his car used to be. He looked only at me. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked broken. He looked like the little boy who used to come to me when he scraped his knee, hoping I would fix it. But I had no bandages left. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was cracked and raw. I looked down at him. I felt a pang of agony in my chest, a physical pain that almost brought me to my knees. This was my boy, my flesh and blood, and I had just orchestrated the destruction of his life. Leonard moved to step between us, playing the protector, but I held up a hand. "It is okay, Leonard," I said. I looked at Brandon. I did not see the thief. I saw the victim of his own weakness. "You have 20 minutes, Brandon," I said. My voice was devoid of anger now, leaving only a deep, exhausted sadness. "The guards are changing the locks. Grab your clothes. Grab your personal items. And then you have to go," Brandon nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He knew. "I didn't do it for the money, Dad," he said softly, crying in the rain. "I did it because I was scared." "I know," I replied. "And that is why this is happening. Because a man who acts out of fear instead of honor is a dangerous man. I cannot have you in my house, Brandon. Not anymore." He lowered his head. He walked past me up the stairs and into the house that was no longer his home. I listened to his footsteps on the hardwood floor, heavy and defeated. I turned to Leonard. "Thank you for coming," I said. "You should go home to your wife." "Are you going to be all right, Desmond?" Leonard asked, searching my face. I looked out at the empty street, at the rain washing away the sins of the night. "I will be fine," I said. "I have a lot of cleaning to do." I watched Leonard leave, and then I turned and walked back into my house. It felt empty. It felt cold. But for the first time in years, it felt safe. I stood in the hallway, listening to the sound of my son packing his life into a suitcase upstairs. I did not go up to help him. I stood my ground. I had won the war, but as I looked at the family photos on the wall, I realized that in a war like this, there are no true victors. There are only survivors. And I had survived. The red taillights of the police cruiser disappeared around the corner, taking the chaotic energy of the night with them. The sirens faded into the distance, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating silence that was broken only by the relentless drumming of the rain against the driveway. The stage was empty now, except for 2 actors. The father who had just delivered the ultimate punishment, and the son who had just lost everything. Brandon stood alone in the dark. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, distorted shadows across the wet pavement. He looked small. Without Tiffany there to whisper poison in his ear, without the facade of the successful businessman to hide behind, he looked like a shell of a man. He took a step toward me, and then his legs seemed to give out. He did not fall because he tripped. He fell because the weight of his reality finally crushed him. He hit the wet concrete on his knees. The splash soaked his designer trousers, the fabric ruined by the mud and the oil of the driveway. He did not try to get up. He just stayed there, kneeling in the rain like a penitent sinner before a priest. But I was not a priest. I had no absolution to give him. "Dad," he choked out. The word came out as a sob. I stood on the porch under the shelter of the overhang, looking down at him. My hands were in my pockets, clenched into fists, not out of anger, but to stop them from shaking. Every instinct in my body, the biological wiring of a parent, screamed at me to run down those steps, to pick him up, to dry him off, to tell him that we would fix this. That is what I had done his whole life. When he crashed his first car, I paid for it. When he failed his college entrance exams, I hired tutors. When his first business went under, I wrote a check. I had spent 30 years acting as his safety net. But tonight I realized that by catching him every time he fell, I had stolen his ability to stand. I didn't mean it, Dad, Brandon cried, his voice rising in desperation. It was her. It was all Tiffany. You know how she is. She pushes and she pushes until I cannot breathe. She told me it was the only way. She said you wouldn't understand. I tried to stop her, Dad. I swear to God I tried. I watched him grasping at straws, trying to rewrite history while the ink was still wet. He was doing exactly what he always did. He was outsourcing the blame. He was making himself the victim in a crime he helped commit. You held the wallet, Brandon, I said, my voice low and steady. You walked into my room. You looked at my sleeping face, and you handed her the knife. Do not insult my intelligence by pretending you were a hostage. You were an accomplice. No, Dad. Please listen. He scrambled forward, crawling on his knees until he was at the bottom of the stairs. I was scared. I am still scared. You do not understand. These guys, the ones I owe the money to, they are not like the banks. They are monsters. He looked up at me, and the terror in his eyes was real. It was the primal fear of a hunted animal. They sent a rock through the window, Dad. They said 24 hours. If I do not pay them, they are going to take my fingers. They are going to kill me. You have to help me. Just this once, please. I will do anything. I will sign whatever you want. Just pay them off. Save my life. I looked at his hands reaching out to me. They were soft hands. Hands that had never known a day of hard labor. Hands that had only ever signed checks drawn on my accounts or held drinks paid for by my sweat. I felt a cold wind blow through the porch, chilling me to the bone. This was the moment. This was the crossroads. I could write a check for $120,000. It would hurt my savings, but it wouldn't bankrupt me. I could make the bad men go away. I could save his fingers. I could save his life. But if I did that, I would lose his soul. If I paid his debt now, he would learn that betrayal carries no cost. He would learn that tears are a currency that can buy forgiveness. He would wait for me to die, and then he would do it all again. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of rain and ozone. I looked at my son, and I saw the stranger he had become. I cannot help you, Brandon, I said. His face crumpled. What? Dad, you can't be serious. They will kill me. I am deadly serious, I replied. I cannot save you from yourself, son. I have spent your entire life saving you. I saved you from consequences. I saved you from responsibility. And look where it got us. It created a man who would steal from his dying mother's memory just to avoid facing his own mistakes. But the money, he wailed, it is nothing to you. You have so much. It is everything to me, I snapped, my voice cracking like a whip. Not the amount. The principle. That money represents 40 years of my life. It represents the days I missed with you because I was working. It represents the security your mother and I built. You did not just try to steal cash, Brandon. You tried to steal my past. You tried to steal my dignity. I stepped back toward the door. The distance between us was only a few feet, but it felt like an ocean. You sold your mother and me for a quick payout, I said, looking down at him with a gaze that held no pity, only a vast, exhausting disappointment. You sold us cheap. You valued our love less than a trip to the Maldives and a quiet life with a woman who hates you. Dad. Please, he begged, reaching for the hem of my trousers. "Do not touch me," I said, stepping out of his reach. He recoiled, his hand hovering in the empty air. "If you are afraid of the loan sharks," I said, "then I suggest you start running. Or better yet, I suggest you stop looking for a savior and start looking for a job. There are plenty of places that are hiring. Construction sites, warehouses, places where men work with their hands." I pointed to his soft, manicured hands. "You have a debt, Brandon. A big one. And for the first time in your life, you are going to pay it. You are going to pay it with your sweat. You are going to pay it with your labor. You are going to learn exactly how hard it is to earn $1 so that you never dare to steal one again." "But I can't," he whispered. "I do not know how." "Then you will learn," I said. "Or you will fail. But you will do it outside of this house." I turned my back on him. It was the hardest thing I have ever had to do physically. My body wanted to turn back. My heart wanted to yield. But my mind remained steel. I walked to the threshold of the door. The warmth of the hallway spilled out onto the porch, a golden light that Brandon was no longer welcome to share. "Dad," he screamed one last time. "Do not leave me here. I have nowhere to go." "You have the whole world, son," I said without looking back. "Try not to break it this time." I stepped inside. I grabbed the heavy brass handle of the front door. I paused for 1 second, listening to the sound of his weeping mixing with the rain. It was a mournful sound, a requiem for the family we used to be. Then I closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking into place was final. It echoed through the empty hallway like a gunshot. I threw the deadbolt. Then I engaged the security chain. I stood there in the foyer, staring at the wood of the door. I could still hear him outside, muffled and distant. He was pounding on the wood now, calling my name. But I did not answer. I did not move. I watched the digital lock on the door panel flash red. The codes had been changed. His fingerprint was wiped from the system. He was locked out. I slid down with my back against the door until I was sitting on the floor. I pulled my knees up to my chest. I was an old man in a big empty house. I was alone. My wife was gone. My son was gone. My daughter-in-law was in a cell. I let out a breath that I felt like I had been holding for 3 years. It was a shuddering, painful breath. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging, but I wiped them away angrily. I would not cry for them. I would mourn the little boy with the bright eyes who used to chase fireflies in the backyard. But I would not cry for the man who tried to bury me before I was dead. I sat there for a long time until the pounding on the door stopped, until the sound of footsteps retreated down the driveway, until the only sound left was the rain cleansing the world outside. I had done it. I had survived the betrayal. I had protected the legacy. But as I sat in the silence of my victory, I realized that the price of justice is often a heavy solitude. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself up from the floor. I had to go to the kitchen. I had to clean up the dinner plates. I had to wash the wine glasses. I had to put the house in order. Life would go on. It had to. And tomorrow, for the first time in a long time, I would wake up in a house that was truly mine again. 30 days. That is exactly how long it takes to dismantle a life you spent 40 years building. It is funny how we attach ourselves to physical objects. We think the walls of a house hold our memories. We think the furniture holds our comfort. But over the last month, as I watched the movers pack up the china and the books and the endless knickknacks, I realized something profound. The house was just a container. And recently it had become a container for poison. Selling it wasn't a loss. It was an exorcism. I signed the deed yesterday. I handed the keys to a young couple who looked at the place with the same hope Patricia and I had in 1982. I hope they have better luck. I hope their children are kind. Now I am sitting in seat 2A on Alitalia flight 604 bound for Rome. The seat is soft leather that smells like success. The champagne in my hand is cold and crisp. The bubbles dance in the flute, catching the sunlight streaming through the oval window. I look out at the tarmac at the busy workers loading luggage and fueling wings, and I feel lighter than I have felt in decades. It is a physical sensation, this lightness. It is as if I have been carrying a heavy backpack full of rocks up a mountain, and I finally just set it down and walked away. The flight attendant walks by. She is a young woman with a kind smile. "Can I get you anything else, Mr. Cole?" she asks. I smile back. "No, thank you, my dear. I have everything I need." And I do. For the first time in a long time, I am not worrying. I am not wondering if Brandon is gambling. I am not wondering what Tiffany is plotting. I am not wondering if I will be able to pay for a new roof or a fake spa business. My bank account is secure. My itinerary is set. I am going to the Amalfi Coast. Patricia and I talked about this trip every anniversary. We bought the guidebooks. We watched the documentaries. We promised each other that next year we would go. But next year never came for her. We were always too busy saving, too busy helping Brandon, too busy being responsible. I take a sip of the champagne. It tastes like regret mixed with hope. I am going for both of us now. I will drink wine in Positano. I will eat pasta in Florence. I will throw a coin in the Trevi fountain. And I will not wish for anything because I am done wishing for things to be different. I am accepting things as they are. I reach into my pocket and pull out my phone. It is the last tether to the life I am leaving behind. I unlock the screen. There are no new messages. There have been no messages for 3 weeks. Not since the day Brandon tried to come back to the house to beg for his golf clubs, and I told the security guard to turn him away. I open the contact list. I scroll down. Brandon. The name sits there on the screen. It is just 7 letters. But those 7 letters used to mean the world to me. They used to mean t-ball games and graduation ceremonies. They used to mean pride. Now they just mean a lesson learned in the hardest way possible. I heard from Leonard that Brandon got a job. He is working at a distribution center loading trucks. It is hard work. Back-breaking work. Leonard said Brandon looks tired. He said he looks thinner. Good. Maybe the sweat will wash away the entitlement. Maybe aching muscles will teach him the value of the dollar he tried to steal. I hope he makes it. I really do, but he has to make it on his own. I cannot carry him anymore. If I carry him, I will only break my own back and he will never learn to walk. My thumb hovers over the name. I remember the day he was born. I remember counting his fingers. I remember promising to protect him from the world. I failed that promise because I didn't protect him from himself. I let him believe that love meant 0 consequences. I was wrong. Love is accountability. I tap the little icon next to his name. The menu pops up. Block this caller. The text is red. It looks like a warning. But to me it looks like permission. I do not hesitate. Not this time. I press the button. Contact blocked. The phone doesn't vibrate. The world doesn't end. The plane doesn't fall out of the sky. It is just a quiet, digital silence. But inside my chest, I feel a door closing. A heavy steel door that has been banging in the wind for years. I have finally locked it. I put the phone back in my pocket. I will not check it when we land. I will not check it when I get to the hotel. I am off the clock. The job of being a father is a lifetime appointment, they say. But I am changing the terms of the contract. I am retired. The captain's voice comes over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are cleared for takeoff. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for departure. The engines roar to life. The plane begins to shudder with power. I feel the force of it pushing me back into my seat. It is a powerful feeling. Momentum. We are moving forward. We are leaving the ground. I look out the window as the runway blurs into a streak of gray. The ground falls away. The cars become toys. The houses become monopoly pieces. My old neighborhood is down there somewhere. My old life is down there. The betrayal, the pain, the police cars in the rain. It is all getting smaller and smaller until it is nothing but a patchwork quilt of greens and browns. I close my eyes and lean my head back. People always say that children are a gift, a blessing, and for many they are. But we rarely talk about the other truth. The truth that some children are lessons. Some children are trials. They are tests of your character and your boundaries. Brandon was my greatest test. He taught me that I have a breaking point. He taught me that dignity is more important than biology. I have graduated from this painful school. I have paid my tuition in tears and dollars. And now I have my diploma. The plane banks sharply to the right, cutting through a layer of white clouds. Suddenly the sun bursts through the cabin, blindingly bright. We have broken through the overcast. Above the clouds, the sky is a perfect, endless blue. I raise my glass of champagne to the empty seat next to me. Here is to you, Patricia, I whisper. We finally made it. And then I raise the glass to myself. And here is to you, Desmond. It is time to live for yourself. I drink the champagne. The plane levels off, cruising toward the horizon, toward Italy, toward peace. The screen fades to black, and the only sound is the steady, powerful roar of the engines carrying me far, far away. We often mistake enabling for loving. We think that by shielding our children from every storm we are protecting them. But in reality, we are stripping them of the survival skills they need. My son did not steal my money because he was evil. He stole it because he was never taught that actions have consequences. The hardest part of being a parent is not saying yes, it is saying no when it breaks your heart. If you are clinging to a toxic relationship just because of shared blood, remember this: you cannot set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them fall so they can finally learn how to stand. Did this story resonate with you? Have you ever had to make a tough choice to protect your own peace against a family member? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of truth and justice. Until next time, stay strong.